Most fantasy narratives ask a simple question: who gets to sit on the throne? The series Arthdal Chronicles asks something far more dangerous. It asks how you build the very first throne in human history. To answer that, the story takes us back to a setting that closely mirrors our own real-world Bronze Age. Before sprawling empires existed, humanity lived in a landscape of scattered, isolated tribes. These communities were generally self-contained, surviving in relative harmony with their immediate environments. But to forge the first nation-state, that ancient harmony had to be intentionally shattered. A vacuum had to be created. Someone had to look at a decentralized world and decide to consolidate all of its resources, people, and territory under a single banner. Doing that requires three distinct human forces, which the series explores in meticulous detail: the physical force of war, the psychological force of power, and the disruptive force of love. By the time we examine these forces, you'll see that the mythical city of Arthdal relies on zero magic to establish its dominance. Instead, it uses a brutal, precise sociological recipe that perfectly mirrors the actual birth of real-world human civilization. The first necessary step in building civilization in Arthdal is violent expansion. To grow, a nascent state must rapidly acquire resources it doesn't naturally possess. We see this play out through the tragic purge of the Neanderthals and the systematic subjugation of weaker neighboring tribes. The founders of Arthdal don't just defeat their neighbors, they entirely erase rival claims to the land. This diagram illustrates the underlying economic logic of that violence. An expanding centralized society requires massive, continuous inputs of land and labor to survive. Notice how these scattered, independent tribes are forcibly absorbed into a single, aggressively expanding central hub. Captured labor and harvested agricultural goods flow continuously inward. The outer edges are entirely depleted to feed and sustain the immense density of the newly established capital. In the context of ancient history, war serves a highly specific function. It acts as the calculated economic engine required to jumpstart a new empire. But this creates an immediate logistical problem. Once the initial wars are won, a tiny minority ruling class is left managing a massive, newly conquered population. The question becomes how to prevent a rebellion. This is where the narrative shifts from the battlefield to the political arena of the capital, led by characters like Tegon and Tealha. Their survival depends entirely on shifting from physical conquest to political control. To understand their mechanism of control, look at this social pyramid. A tiny ruling class forms at the apex, visually isolating itself. The massive population below is deliberately fractured into distinct, divided segments. Vertical movement up the pyramid is blocked by divine law, while horizontal unity is severed by class divisions. Power, as practiced in Arthdal, is simply the codification of wartime violence into everyday law. The physical chains of the battlefield are replaced by the psychological chains of society. Yet Tegon's system of absolute control contains a fatal flaw. The human spirit eventually rejects extreme subjugation, no matter how perfectly the system is engineered. Unsam and Tanya enter the story as avatars of the oppressed and the colonized. They represent the third force, one that actively disrupts the rigid structure of the empire. The ruling class operates on cold, calculated political maneuvers. Unsam and Tanya are driven by enduring empathy, by radical equality, and a desire for mutual survival. A grassroots rebellion operates on different mechanics than a state military. A unifying emotional bond can spread rapidly through an oppressed population, effectively bypassing the ideological barriers the state set up to keep people divided. In the ruthless mathematics of civilization building, love functions as the ultimate sociological weapon, capable of dismantling tyranny from the inside out. The entire narrative of the show builds toward the explosive collision of these three pillars. You cannot introduce that much systemic pressure without it eventually finding a release. What you are watching is the cyclical life cycle of human empires. They are initiated by the brutal expansion of war. They are organized and maintained by the structural control of power, and they are ultimately tested by the love and resilience of the people they subjugate. Arthdal Chronicles transcends the standard fantasy genre because it applies the actual mechanics of anthropology and sociology to every character decision. Watching the series through this lens provides a historical framework for decoding both the fictional world of Arthdal and the dark, complex origins of our own real-world societies. If you enjoy analyzing the deeper sociology and history hidden inside your favorite stories, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel. We have a lot more intellectual deep dives coming up, and you can start by checking out the related video on your screen right now. Thanks for watching.